world.
But there are credible reports, including from international media inside Homs, that children are caught in the violence.
The young identified as innocent victims in the crisis in Syria, and Russia explains their veto of the UN resolution.
Our Western colleagues are complaining about us. I could say that we were let down by them.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Hello and thanks for joining us once again. Later in the program, we'll also hear from NATO troops in Afghanistan working towards a handover to local authorities. But first, more than 400 children have been killed in the ongoing conflict in Syria, while hundreds of other youngsters are being held in detention where they face torture, sexual abuse and other horrors. It's a dreadful situation, as Diane Penn reports.
There has been an intensification of fighting in Syria, and the international community remains concerned. UNICEF is urging Syria to allow unhindered access to hundreds of children, the youngest victims of the fighting that has been raging for nearly a year. UNICEF spokesperson Marixie Mercado says the situation has only worsened with the shelling of the city of Homs in the western part of the country. The city has seen increased bombardment in recent days.
UNICEF does not have access to the affected areas of Homs and cannot confirm the impact of the attacks there. But there are credible reports, including from international media inside Homs, that children are caught in the violence. Those injured must be given immediate and unconditional access to specialized medical care.
This is not the first time that UNICEF has raised the issue of children in Syria being caught in the crossfire between the national forces and anti-government fighters. Mercado says that while more than 400 children have been killed so far, Syrian human rights groups add that an additional 400 children are being held.
There are reports of children being arbitrarily arrested, tortured, and sexually abused while in detention. Over the past few days, reported heavy shelling by government forces of civilian neighborhoods in the city of Homs is undoubtedly causing further suffering for more children.
This weekend, the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution on Syria, but the international community vows to continue to seek a way towards ending the conflict. The Russian foreign minister is currently in Damascus to find a solution. Meanwhile, in New York, the Russian ambassador Vitaly Churkin doesn't see a solution being found in the UN Security Council.
If there is an opportunity to do something in the Security Council which will not create another falling out, we'll try to take that opportunity. But at this point, unfortunately, I don't see any room for constructive work in the Security Council, but we're not ruling anything out.
That's Russian ambassador to the UN Vitaly Churkin, who believes an agreement between members of the UN Security Council to end the ongoing crisis in Syria could have been struck if Western powers had shown more patience. Both Russia and China vetoed a key Security Council resolution which was aimed at bringing an end to the conflict in Syria. The UN estimates the 11 months of fighting there has cost over 5,000 lives. Daniel Dickinson has more details on this from UN headquarters in New York.
The conflict between the Syrian government and the pro-democracy movement has, according to all reports, intensified since Saturday, when the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution aimed at bringing an end to the violence. Fighting has continued in Syria for 11 months now. But, according to the Russian ambassador to the UN, had Western powers been more patient during the negotiations, an agreement could have been found.
On Syria, we are trying to do the right thing. We take our decisions. I regret the fact that there was a veto on Saturday. I think had we worked for 2 or 3 more days, we could have had a resolution which could be unanimously adopted today or tomorrow. Our Western colleagues are complaining about us. I could say that we were let down by them, by their impatience.
Both Russia and China vetoed the resolution, which was tabled by Morocco and backed by the Arab League group of nations. The resolution called for an end to violence and a Syrian-led transition to a democratic political system. Russia says the resolution was unbalanced, as it didn't call on the Syrian opposition to distance itself from extremist groups. The Russians are now taking a different diplomatic tack, with the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, travelling to the Syrian capital Damascus on Tuesday to meet with President Bashar al-Assad. Speaking in New York, Ambassador Churkin said it was unlikely the Security Council would now find a solution.
If there is an opportunity to do something in the Security Council which will not create another falling out, we'll try to take that opportunity. But at this point, unfortunately, I don't see any room for constructive work in the Security Council. But we're not ruling anything out.
The international community continues to call for the killing in Syria to stop. On Tuesday, the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, said that at least 400 children have been killed in the conflict so far. Daniel Dickinson, United Nations, New York.
By-elections scheduled for April to fill parliamentary seats in Myanmar will be a critical test for the government as it carries out political reforms in the country. That's the assessment of Thomas Oye Quintana, a human rights expert on Myanmar who has just concluded a 6-day visit to the Asian country. Myanmar held general elections in 2010 and a civilian government was installed last year after many years of military rule. Mr. Quintana went to Myanmar to assess the country's human rights situation today as a follow-up to his last visit in August 2011. He gave his impressions to Patrick Megwa.
I have to say that there are a lot of shortcomings which remains of my concern. But as a general assessment, the situation of human rights has improved.
When you say there are shortcomings, what are they?
The government has released a number of political prisoners, and I commended the president for that decision. But I visited Insane Prison, which is the most important prison in Myanmar, and I had a chance to interview prisoners of conscience. According to the information that I have, there are remaining prisoners of conscience in Myanmar that the government needs to finish the process of releasing all of them. Other really important concern is the situation in Kachin state. In this state, there is still a conflict between the government and non-state armed groups, which compromises the right of civilians with serious human rights abuses. I have to emphasize, though, that these abuses to the civilians come not only from the government side, but also from the non-state armed groups.
You said there are still prisoners of conscience in Myanmar. How many have so far been released and how many are still in detention?
There is a controversy in respect to the numbers of prisoners. I have urged the government to take action in this regard. It is the government's obligation to establish what are the prisoners who remain in prison. What is clearly, though, from my point of view, it's regardless of the number, is that there are a lot of prisoners around the country, not only in insane prison, but also in other state prisons, which will deserve to be released.
The government of Myanmar has been instituting several reforms. There is going to be elections and Aung San Suu Kyi will be contesting. Did you get the feeling that these reforms are going to be sustained?
The by-elections are very important. It's a test for the government. But I have to say that what is important is not only the day of the elections, but also the process leading to the elections, meaning that the government will have to allow political parties to freely campaign. This is very important. I hope that these elections take place according to international standards, so they are free and fair. Again, this is a critical test for the government, and it is positive that the NLD and Madam Aung San Suu Kyi have decided to participate.
Did you have a chance to meet with Aung San Suu Kyi, and what did she tell you about the whole reform process?
I did meet Aung San Suu Kyi. It was a meaningful discussion. We exchanged views in respect to many issues, including the problem of the lack of independence of judiciary and rule of law in Myanmar, which is absolutely necessary in any transition to democracy as a way to guarantee human rights of the people. We also discussed, of course, the conditions of the elections. She's ready to participate. She would like to see from the government no limitations in terms of the campaign. And, of course, she sees that there is an opportunity at this historical moment in Myanmar.
Thomas Oye Quintana there, speaking about the situation in Myanmar. To NATO's work in Afghanistan now, where the Afghan border police not only guard the borders, but also operate customs clearance for a high volume of supplies entering the country in the north across the Friendship Bridge in Port Hariritan. Their mentors are members of the US Army's 170th Brigade. Jeff Holden is in Afghanistan and spoke to the brigade's Colonel Matlock and others about their advisory position.
In the haze ahead is Uzbekistan, the country bordering Afghanistan's Balkh province on the north, along the Daryoy-Amu, or Amu River. This crossing, spanned by what is known as the Friendship Bridge, stands as one of ISAF's key supply routes into Afghanistan, alongside the Pakistani border crossing, which has been closed to traffic since November. The Afghan Border Police, or ABP, is the primary force guarding this crossing. Training for the ABP has been provided by the U.S. Army's 170th Brigade, a fighting brigade now turned advisory force.
You have 90 seconds to fire all 3 magazines.
They admit it's not the sort of work that makes headlines, but is necessary for building strong, sustainable organizations.
So it's not the stuff that's going to make the highlight reel. Absolutely. It is all the practice and preparation and all that fundamental drill work, from how do you conduct maintenance on your weapons, how do you train policemen to do basic police activities, how do you do vehicle maintenance, how do you build small unit leaders, all of those things that are very, you almost want to use the word mundane, but at the end of the day, they are exactly what needs to happen in order for the organization to become an effective organization.
Some advisors from ISAF contend that customs searching and processing capacity needs to increase, and the system will need to improve. Which is no surprise to the 170th, who say that Afghan forces only now are coming into their own in terms of benefiting from NATO training and resources.
If you look at the effort with the Afghan National Security Forces, Army, police, other components, it is really now just starting to hit its peak. Even though there are fewer coalition forces in country today than there were 12 months ago.
And while the 170th, which is now in the process of leaving the North, has received acclaim for its work as an advisory force, the real test of preparedness for the Afghan Border Police will come in the future,
Are there any questions?
as they are advised by the U.S. National Guard's 37th Brigade, a change that will mean a reduction of more than 1,000 troops. Lieutenant Colonel Pike says that while the ISAF force will be smaller, it will be more specifically focused on advising.
Previously, the 170th Brigade actually was a larger element. The 37th came in much smaller, about at least 1,000 soldiers less. So while there's less soldiers in the sector, the advisor team is at least as big, if not bigger.
Transfer of responsibility to Afghan forces, with ISAF stepping back into an advisor role, is in fact the broader ISAF mission all over Afghanistan.
The mission is to build the Afghan capability to the point where they can build their own capability, sustain their own organizations, and continue with the mission after we're finished with the advisor mission.
The regional customs advisor says he is not concerned about the change-out of ISAF personnel. He's used to ISAF groups coming and going.
We always experience this one. Myself actually do not have any problem, because with the new team, when I introduced with them, when I explained them these things, we established a good relation and friendship relation.
While talk among ISAF is about the change of command in the north and the new advisory team for the ABP, Lieutenant Colonel Zetterstrom, an outgoing officer from the 170th, made it clear that it is the Afghan Border Police, not ISAF, who are squarely shouldering the brunt of work and responsibility for the crossing.
You know, they're kind of at the tip of the spear, so to speak. And to be frank, they do that on their own, day to day. We advise, but if we weren't here, the system's in place and it would continue without us.
Jeff Holden, in Balkh Province, Afghanistan.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
As Latin America's first country to legalize gay marriage, Argentina is becoming a popular tourist destination for lesbian, gay, transsexual and bisexual travellers. Buenos Aires, in particular, has plenty on offer to attract visitors who want to relax and celebrate in an environment where they hope to feel welcome and accepted. NTN 24's Brian Andrews is there.
Last July, Argentina legalized same-sex marriage. Nearly 2 years later, Buenos Aires is among the world's top 5 gay tourist destinations, and the country is cashing in on it. According to the Gay Chamber of Commerce, gay and lesbian tourists spend twice as much as their heterosexual counterparts on vacation in Argentina. What's more, they travel up to 3 or 4 times a year.
The reason's quite simple. My sister, for example, has 2 children. She has to make sure they receive a good education, have good doctors, are well dressed and everything else involved in raising a family. Gay couples have 2 salaries coming in and are able to spend their money on other things. It's that simple.
The economic advantages aside, Argentina is welcoming gay people into its culture. Even the emblematic tango is being adapted.
It's becoming official. People see it. It exists. It's out there. Whether they like it or not, or want to share in it, is another question.
3,500 same-sex unions have taken place in Argentina in the last 18 months. Giles and Alejandro were among the first to tie the knot. But despite the country's relatively relaxed attitude, they believe there's still room for improvement.
This is just a small step. There are still too many taboos in Argentine society. Despite the law, it's not the most adaptable society. You still see discrimination here.
Discrimination which many hope will one day be something of the past. Eleonora Castell is one of those. She challenges traditional stereotypes with her children's puppet shows. In this sketch, Prince Charming falls in love with another prince.
If we start adding different endings to these same children's stories, they'll see all kinds of love are equal, which is the real truth.
With more than 1 million gay visitors to Buenos Aires each year, maybe the fairy tales will start to look a little different sooner than expected.
Brian Andrews from NTN 24 with that report. So, to life in the West, where some indulgences can be good for you. We've known that resveratrol, a chemical found in red wine and other plant products, does have health effects, but scientists now know how. Joe Belenfi has the story.
Researchers are finding that the effects of resveratrol, a naturally occurring chemical found in red wine and other plant products, seem to be more complicated than originally thought. Dr. J. H. Chung, a senior investigator at NIH, says research published over the past few years has shown that feeding resveratrol to obese mice protected them against diet-induced obesity, as well as some of its consequences.
Resveratrol has been associated with a number of different healthful effects, such as extending the lifespan in lower animals, as well as protecting against aging-related metabolic diseases such as type 2 diabetes.
The chemical has received significant interest from pharmaceutical companies for its potential to combat diabetes, inflammation, and cancer. But Dr. Chung says before researchers can transform resveratrol into a safe and effective medicine, they need to know exactly how it works on a cellular level.
It's possible that plant-based foods or chemicals can affect cells and physiology by a number of different ways.
Resveratrol was originally thought to directly activate a particular protein called SIRT1, which is associated with aging. A new study shows that resveratrol inhibits certain types of proteins, enzymes that help regulate energy. Dr. Chung notes that resveratrol, in its natural form, interacts with many proteins and may cause not yet known toxicities as a medicine, particularly with long-term use.
Resveratrol has a number of other targets that may or may not be good for you, and no long-term studies have been done with humans.
He adds that the levels of resveratrol found in wine or foods are likely not high enough to produce significant health benefits or problems.
Studies that have shown effects in humans usually required about 1 gram of resveratrol, pure resveratrol. So you probably won't get that kind of effect drinking red wine.
Convincing clinical studies in humans have used about 1 gram of resveratrol per day, roughly equivalent to the amount found in 667 bottles of red wine.
The question is, how about supplements? It's not clear how pure these supplements are. They could say 150 milligrams, but it's not clear whether it's pure 150 milligrams of resveratrol.
researchers emphasize that there is a clear need for additional careful and well-controlled studies to show how resveratrol operates.
Joe Belenfi reporting there from Bethesda, Maryland.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation presented its Access to Learning Award of $1 million to the Arid Lands Information Network, otherwise known as ALAN, which provides knowledge and information through a variety of innovative channels in remote communities throughout Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Members of these communities use the technology and other tools at ALAN's knowledge centres to gain information to improve their health, increase their incomes and better their lives.
The people of Nguruman used to share the single newspaper that found its way to their small village once a week. Located in the desert-like terrain of southwestern Kenya, Nguruman had little contact with the outside world. That changed with the opening of the Nguruman Maarifa Center in 2006. Now the villagers can read the news every day, online. Most residents of Nguruman had never even seen a computer before. Now, many are proficient. Before, they felt isolated. Now, they are communicating with people all over the world. But the services offered by the Nguruman Maarifa Center are not just helping people feel more connected. Like all 12 Maarifa or knowledge centers within the Arid Lands Information Network across Eastern Africa, Nguruman is giving people access to knowledge that will help them improve their lives and strengthen their communities. The Arid Lands Information Network, known as ALAN, recognizes that, like access to healthcare, education and employment, access to information and technology plays a critical role in social and economic development. Providing access is only the beginning. ALAN staff must figure out exactly what kind of information people need and how best to offer it to them.
Each center and each community, they have different needs.
One community might need information about HIV/AIDS prevention or treatment. Another might be dealing with a particular pest on their crops. Another might need to know how to treat a poisonous snake bite. ALAN staff identifies these specific needs through partnerships, from NGOs to government agencies to volunteers on the ground. They then decide the best way to convey the information. With only one paid staff member at each Maarifa Center, ALAN utilizes its many volunteers to disseminate valuable information. In almost all of the communities ALAN supports, agriculture is the single most important part of the economy. The quantity and quality of farmers' yields are critical to their livelihoods. Small farmers face serious issues: drought, pestilence, and lack of resources. Ali Hassan Muley barely made a living from his small retail shop. When he joined the Kuso Maarifa Center, he started reading ALAN's agricultural magazine, Baobab. He learned to use a computer and browse the internet. He soon realized he could make a better living off the land. To do this, Ali had to deal with something other farmers in the area were dealing with: lack of water.
And from the information here in our Maarifa Center, I got to know about water harvesting. I came to know more about good agricultural practices from other areas.
ALAN supported Ali and several other volunteers to learn about water harvesting techniques from other farmers who had successfully developed practices well suited for their own dry, arid climates. When they returned to Kuso, they participated in field days to showcase their newly acquired knowledge. They helped create videos, CD-ROMs, and podcasts. They talked to a local pastor who preached about water harvesting at church. They did whatever it took to spread the word. Pest control is another pressing issue for farmers. One farmers group in Kuso found that one of their most common pesticides was leading to respiratory and other health problems. At their Maarifa Center, they learned to create a new low-cost pesticide using plants that are freely growing in the area, which they found to have no negative impact on their health. They wrote a song that they could perform to teach others about their discovery.
We set up the Marifa Center, all aimed towards simplifying technical messages into what is tangible for a common person to understand.
Others use the Marifa Center to find economic empowerment outside of the pastoral way of life. Leonard Ndungu returned to Nguruman after graduating from college in Nairobi, but struggled to find employment. At the center, he learned how to write a blog so he could advertise his budding safari business. Soon word spread over the internet and Leonard's business took off. Leonard brings much needed commerce to his community, buying food supplies locally, letting craftspeople sell their wares to his guests, and using community members as porters.
Through the benefit of the Marifa Center, I was able to change and improve the living standard of my community.
The Allen model was created for replication. Already, organizations from other African nations and the European Union have visited these centers to learn more.
We are opening up to other organizations, and that's why the Marifa Center is an open access space to come and learn how we do things, and we freely share information so that they can be able to replicate.
What does it take to create a center? A room? Maybe an old shipping container. Computers, an internet connection, perhaps a shelf full of books. These are all important, but the most vital piece is the people, the community members, the volunteers who give generously of their time to keep the knowledge flowing from one person to another, from one community to another. In these communities, information never stops with a single individual.
We preach our gospel of information, but we really need a community that is knowledge-driven. It's only when we have a knowledge-driven society that we can develop. Otherwise, without knowledge, there is nowhere we are heading to.
Preaching the gospel of information. It's what the teachers are doing, it's what the nurses are doing, it's what the farmers and beekeepers and herders are doing. And it's what Allen is all about.
That report from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that is The World for this week. If you want to learn more about the program or wish to make a contribution to the show, then please do visit us at www.theworldradioshow.com. From there you can also access our Facebook page and join the discussion on many of the topics raised in the program. The World is committed to bringing you stories that affect the people of our planet, either on a mass or individual scale, and we hope to do so with balance and integrity. As always, we welcome your comments and your suggestions, so please do keep in touch at www.theworldradioshow.com. The program is produced and compiled by Tim Stackpool, and I look forward to your company next time. Until